Hello, everyone. I welcome you to another session on life coaching Steve on helping him find what really mattered to him. Meet Steve. Steve is a senior manager in his current capacity with a 12 years of work experience, and along with a huge span of control, he is also responsible to lead a team of 3 assistant managers. He was doing quite well in his job. And in his present job, where he has been working for the past 7 years, Steve was of the opinion that he would like to contribute more and he might even retire from the same organization that he was part of. But one fine day, there was a major shift in Steve's career life. After his regular appraisal, Steve was called in for a special meeting by his supervisor and he was fired from his job. This left Steve quite devastated by the sudden change of events, and he found himself completely shaken to the core by what just happened. He was so unprepared and was so taken aback that initially he couldn't really understand what could be the best way to react, respond, whether to fight back the organization for treating him this way or to simply just quit the very moment because he was given a 2-month notice period. He was in no mood to serve the firm for even a minute more. In addition to this, Steve was also going through a lot of turmoil in his personal life. His relationship with his wife, his partner, has gone sour, and they were on a constant conflict mode with a with opinions not just differing, but their approach towards life, towards their priorities. Everything was in a deep mess. And this has been happening for the past 1.5 years, which Steve, to some extent, at the back of his mind, do realize that there was something not right in his life. He was not enjoying his work, but he continued to work on. He was also not enjoying his personal life, but somehow he dragged that also on, thinking like all of us think in a very generic way. Maybe things will fall in its place, or maybe I'm just overthinking, or maybe it could just be I'm a little tensed on account of some client meet or any other deadline that I have to make. Friends, this one point I just would want any one of you listening to this as a working professional. If you observe that while working and for a prolonged period of time, you constantly get reminded by a deeper conscious that there's something not wrong somewhere, or you feel not very engaged with the way you're currently working, or if there is something in your personal life, some issue that is still unresolved and it has a cascading effect on your career right now, my request to each one of you who's listening to this is seek help before it's too late, as it was happening in the case of Steve. This is how Steve's current state was when he came in for signing up for my coaching assignment. The one question that Steve constantly asked himself and which he couldn't find an answer to was what really mattered to him, what's important. He couldn't really was able to get a grip of what were his personal values. He felt depleted. He felt as if he could no longer take it. But this frustration, this constant staying stuck, this state of confusion, I would like to tell you all, while I also helped and assisted Steve, To everyone watching this video, that understand no issue gets blown out of proportion overnight. Just as we don't get success overnight, similarly, if we do not address our problem and we try to just push them under the carpet, or if we feel that we're not taking appropriate measures to address what's bothering us for a long time, it may lead to a situation, a very difficult situation, very similar to the way Steve was in right now, with such a good track record and a wonderful job. There has been several things that Steve did wrong, and the way he was coming across to his organization, that was the very reason he was fired from his job. So not what get us to higher levels will always take us ahead. There's a point where we really need to sit back, introspect, when we find things not really going the way we envision them to be. Steve missed doing that for 1.5 years, and as a result, this is how you find him. I told Steve, along with many other things that we're going to do, let me help you with a very simple technique that can at least address this burning question that's running in your mind. Because he was in his house with no job at hand, and his wife, after a major conflict, has moved out of the house. And that's how Steve has been living for quite some time now. Journey of Self is a coaching program in which Steve had enrolled in, and this runs for 2 months, 3 months, and a 5-month tenure. In the case of Steve, I gave him a 2-month assignment because I said, Steve, the issue that you are in right now is a personal issue that has impacted you, your entire self, and also your career. And we have to dig deep. But before we get there, we first need to help you find your map of where you feel lost and stuck. And then we'll come to the other domains where I'll help you move through, create a plan, and find your clarity and direction. And that's exactly what we did. In this 2-month assignment of 8 to 9 sessions, we just focused on helping identify the personal values of Steve, the burning question he had in his head, because this was the map that he needed to move ahead in his life, wherever it was, whether to his own self, whether in his relationship, and even in his next job or the career move that he was about to make. Friends, personal values is what really is something which will help any one of us to understand what's really important to us in life and what really matters to us. And when we lose this compass, we may find ourselves in maybe much more worse condition that Steve was in. This personal value exercise was very simple. In fact, Steve was a bit skeptical, but I insisted, and I said, Steve, do not underestimate the power of simplicity. And I gave him this journal writing technique I taught him, and after that I pushed him with just 5 questions, which I gave him to answer the first 2 in the coming week, each week, which we did in a span of fortnight, discussed that at length, and help him understand his personal values. The remaining 3 we did in the remaining consecutive 3 weeks. These were the questions, just simple 5 questions, before we get on to solve the deeper problems of what Steve was suffering from. So what matters? Now, these are not generally any typical journal prompts. These are pulled in from a psychology tool backed by science. And the very idea behind these questions is to help someone identify those hidden answers which has got the person into this very confused state where the person has lost track of the meaning, purpose, and also what's important to him. So what you see on your screen are those 5 questions I asked Steve to sit back, relax, and answer them. Now, these are the responses. This is what Steve shared with me when I gave him this. And while you look at it, each answer to the question asked, this was a 4 to 5 week work we did together. And to each, I asked Steve to associate a value, what's really important. And you would find that in the first answer, so if we go one by one, and if you could read the questions yourself, overall, if you look at it, the overall theme that emerges, if you just count the values associated, how many of it are repeating, you will find that family, relationship, freedom was something that was getting repeated again and again in his answers. So friends, what you see on your screen are just summarized answers of what the deep work that me and Steve did. And this repeat of values spoke at length about and also helped Steve what really mattered to him. This is also one of the most powerful and a very, very profound way to figure out what really matters to us when we find ourselves lost in life. In case of Steve, he was amazed by the insight he was finding while he wrote the answers to these questions. Like, the question, the second one, what would you do if you were free from fear? This question took Steve back to his childhood and teenage years, to a fatal fall, to his attempt to rock climbing, to how he developed those fears and how certain fears were indoctrinated in him, and how a cluster of all these thoughts and ideas in his mind created a fear of heights inside him. And when you pose a person a question, his answer to that is completely opposite of what he really feared, which was an adventure. Similarly, if you look at the last answer, what he always wanted to do, and his third question, what would you do if you know you could not fail? Steve was someone, even though while he narrated his deep mess with his partner, his wife, and the various conflicts he had and the opinions he held, when we dig deeper and deeper with these set of simple questions and one story led to another, Steve himself found out that how much he loved his wife, his partner who she was his friend from his early college years, and how much there was a lot of assumption which led to conflicts and misunderstanding, and how much he really intend to have a successful relationship. But since he never understood the right way to approach it, or he always went with the flow and always went with this most erroneous approach of thinking things will fall in place on their own, which then led to a deep mess that he was in, not just with his wife, but also with his job. And I advised at that time to Steve that, Steve, as you now learn your values, as you understand your personal values, what really, really matters to you, would you not do anything to honor that? Because if this is coming right from you, deep inside you, it does mean that it matters to you a lot. And this had a very profound effect on Steve and how he superficially thought about things, whether it was his job, which didn't really interest him, but he kept on working because somehow he felt, what else will he do? He never explored the other side of him with that huge potential. In the same way, when he had conflicts with his wife, he would just ignore most of it, while he actually could have had a more deepening bond and a meaningful relationship had he put in some effort to speak with her, to stop his assumptions, to work on it. All of this he was realizing as he sat back in those span of 8 weeks where we did this work, sat through and understood and gave his answers, which not only gave him what really mattered to him, but also made him understand how he was completely on a wrong track because he never knew what is the real possibility with the help of a life coach, where you could do a lot, not just save your life or your career, but have a much more meaningful relationships, which is possible, and a good job and a good life. And it's not something like too good to be true. It is all about seeking help, reaching out, getting the help, getting into action, and reaping those benefits. So, friends, if just like Steve, you would like to begin your life, live it with more meaning, not just your life, your career, or your relationship, where you want to really nurture them, live a life that you always wanted, but somehow you don't know what really mattered to you, just like Steve, I invite you to another session with me, just like Steve. Here are my coordinates, and you will find the link to apply and enroll in the video description of this session. I look forward to meeting you soon in a coaching session. And let's embark on a journey of self, and just like Steve, find what really matters to you. Thank you.